This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Linda Raftree is a co-founder of Kurante, a company dedicated to helping organizations better understand how technology can improve development outcomes. Linda has worked at the intersection of community development, participatory media, youth, gender, and information and communication technology since 1994. She has advised the Rockefeller Foundation's Evaluation Office on the use of ICTs in monitoring and evaluation, and worked with Plan International USA on youth engagement, innovation, transparency, and strategy. She's also conducted research on adolescent girls and ICTs for UNICEF, the role of ICTs in child and youth migration for the Oak Foundation, the use of mobile technologies in youth workforce development for the mEducation Alliance, and ICT-enabled monitoring and evaluation for Rockefeller. Linda is also a co-founder of Regarding Humanity, which encourages debate and dialogue around the portrayal of the poor in the media, social impact work, and nonprofit marketing. She coordinates Technology Salons in New York City and advocates for greater dialogue and discussion around the ethics of ICT use and data privacy in the humanitarian and development space. She also writes Wait, What? A blog about new technology in community development. I spoke with Linda in New York. Hi there, Linda. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
And so we're talking on April 9th. Where are you sitting today?
I'm sitting in my apartment, my home office in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, New York.
Yes.
I hope that spring has sprung for you.
It's getting there. It's getting there. It's been very slow this year, though.
Well, it's been a rough winter.
Yeah.
Linda, you've been a development and aid professional for some time now. Why don't you tell us about the sort of collection of activities that you do and how you characterize who you are as a professional right now?
Sure. So I went freelance, I guess, or started kind of my own thing a couple of years ago with my business partner, Wait&hellip. And so we do that, which is very tiny, 2-person. I guess it's a company, which is weird to say because I've always worked in the nonprofit sector. But
stop right there for a second. Why is that weird to say? Why does the nonprofit sector still have a hang-up about being in business? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think most people have a hang-up. I think it's just me.
I would disagree. I think every time we talk about private sector stuff, people are. There's definitely a feeling of you're in the business of making money, but. It is business at the end of the day. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So and remind me, the name of the firm is?
Yeah, so it's called Kurante. Which is, I'll embarrass Wayne for a minute. I think he wanted to name it after something related to like Star Wars planets or something. I was just like, no, you're the geek in this partnership, not me. So we settled on Kurante, which is also very geeky. It means running in Esperanto, which I was dumb enough to say, where do they speak that? So, Esperanto is a sort of made-up language that tries to become the one and only language. I think it was in its heyday maybe in the 80s. I'm not really sure. But we both like running. We could think of two things we had in common, which was running and unfortunately drinking. So we thought maybe having a company called Kurante, which is around running, which is kind of how we approach the world. Kind of always running, trying to keep up and also just being healthy and all that. So
excellent.
Yeah.
And so what does Kurante do? What's the focus of, I know that ICT for development is both you and your partner's focal point. Is that the service you provide as well?
Yeah, so we do all kinds of stuff, from everything from strategy to supporting with implementation to helping source and identify, partners for other organizations that are looking to work with, whether it's technology partners or content partners or things like that. I've been doing quite a bit of research around topics, which, my thing is usually ICTs, and so it might be what's the role of ICTs in, child migration, or it might be ICTs and youth workforce development, or it might be ICTs and, girls' rights. So it's usually, it's kind of ICTs. For me, I'm quite interested in the cross-cutting pieces of all that. So I'm interested in ethics, privacy, participation, empowerment, civic engagement, things that I feel are sort of cross-cutting, that are part of pretty much any development intervention, which I also hate calling them interventions, but any kind of development effort, I feel like has a number of cross-cutting things that are really important to make it work. So I really like to look at the cross-cuttings and then the role of ICTs and those cross-cutting things in a particular sector, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Everyone who's listening to this podcast gets that for sure.
So I've got that. And then I'd say the other couple of things that we do are technology salons, which are almost my favorite thing of all, just because we get this group of really cross-disciplinary people together, everything from practitioners to academics to social entrepreneurs to technology developers to the private sector to, every now and then we get someone in who's actually, working on the ground if they're passing through, and just get a really cross-disciplinary team together, not even a team, but just a group of people that are looking at something from a whole bunch of different angles and just really dig in, kind of have a no holds barred discussion around challenges and possibilities with technology and development, and so those are really fun as well.
I'm super excited to dive into more of those topics, but before that, I want to figure out, how did you stumble into the profession of development and aid? Was this something that you knew you woke up one day in high school and said, this is where I'm going, or did you find your way here?
I think stumble is a perfect term for it. I studied anthropology at university just because I thought it was really interesting. I had never been actually thought about a career, to be honest with you. And I ended up getting married to my key informant, who was a Salvadoran guy who lived in my neighborhood in Los Angeles. And we moved to El Salvador. It was right at the end of the Civil War. So I was pretty much never really an expat aid worker, as sometimes those people are called. I was, I think, more of an immigrant. I was somebody's wife. We moved there. We lived in the barrio. We had no money. His family had lived in the barrio a long time. We lived next door to his parents. And I was really just kind of being a wife of a guy in the barrio, and doing, myself kind of odd jobs. Sometimes we would sell used clothing that my mom had sent me down, or giving English classes to people in the barrio for like 75 cents an hour. He was working as a mechanic, which was the job he had before he had migrated to the States. So I kind of did that for a few years, and it was really, I think, what gave me a slightly different perspective on the field of development and why it sometimes really frustrates me. But
for perspective, give us like a time frame. Is this 90s?
This is 1991.
Okay, sure.
That I moved to El Salvador. So yeah, and then I got bored after a few years and decided I should do something with my brain. So I had learned how to wash clothes by hand, and my mother-in-law taught me to cook, and I would, carry things home from the market and how to negotiate your fruits and vegetables. And, I had a child at this, by then. And so I had kind of done all of the learning to be a housewife in the barrio and learning Spanish and all that stuff. And I had just kind of gotten bored with things. I wanted to use my mind a little bit. So I took a class at the university, which was the first time in El Salvador that they had ever been able to teach about the history of the 20th century. Because after the Civil War ended, then there was a little bit more freedom of speech and that sort of thing. And so I just ended up running into a woman at the same class, and she was sort of my first foreign friend. She was Finnish, and her dad was running an NGO, and they needed a translator, and they asked me if I wanted to be a translator, and I was going to earn about 4 times more money in 3 weeks of translating than I was earning at that point. I had gotten a job as an English teacher at a private school, and I was earning, something like $80 a month. And so I was going to have this, for me, this giant salary of doing this 3-week gig as a translator. And so I decided to take the risk, and that was at a nonprofit. I still remember when I had to translate the word and, the phrase NGO. And I was just like, I don't know how to translate that, because I didn't even know NGOs existed at the time. I just that's how I got started. They kept me on as an administrative assistant for a while. And then I worked in communications, and then I worked in managing, grant portfolios to local NGOs there. And then eventually moved out from that NGO into my next job, which was at Plan International. And that's kind of how it all went. So it was definitely stumbling along and just kind of, doing whatever came my way, which I think is not very helpful to people who want to sort of plan a career out. But I guess maybe the key thing is just, keep your mind open and go for anything that will give you an interesting experience.
Just a reflection for you as well as just the rest of the listeners, anybody who's a new listener to the program. This is not an untypical, not only conversation, but just sort of path into development. One of the things that we've discovered at Aidpreneur, it's just an open secret. It's really hard to have a career path.
Yeah.
That's sort of quote unquote traditional, right? Most of us stumble along, and I won't bore the listeners with my story once again, but it's almost exactly the same. And we've heard that literally hundreds of times now, which is fantastic. I think it's great to hear each unique one because there are so many different choices, and it's just about you accepting the opportunity and just continue the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. So take us to the other end of the spectrum. You sort of built a career for a long time. You were a plan, you were at Oxfam, you were at a number of different organizations. You woke up one day and you said, it's time for me to make the leap to leave organizational life and sort of hang out my plank and go it alone. What was that moment? Why did you make the leap? What happened, or what was the decision point?
Well, I think, I'll say one thing. I don't really like following rules, and I have a hard time working inside of structure that's imposed on me by others. And I've always been quite good at kind of getting away with not having to follow the rules in organizations. And one of the great things about working with Plan was that I just had so much space in the organization to do interesting, fun things. And I was always able to kind of see a couple years ahead of and be like, hey guys, we should probably be looking at this. And a lot of times people wouldn't pay attention because everybody's so busy, and people are like, no, I'm writing grant proposals, I'm implementing this, I'm worried about, making sure the marketing thing, so it's really hard, I think, to kind of pull people out of, the really demanding jobs that they have on a day-to-day basis. And so I think, if you're somebody who's looking a little bit ahead, it can feel frustrating sometimes working in large organizations that are really hard to kind of turn into different directions and stuff. And so, I think I had so much opportunity within, different organizations for career development, for learning, and I don't think anyone at Plan ever specifically, tried to tell me no or say, you can't do this, you can't explore that. But it just got to a point where I was getting a lot of offers from people on the outside who wanted to explore the same things that I wanted to explore, and maybe wasn't able to get as much, buy-in within a large organization to do certain things. And it felt like it was moving really slowly. So for me, it was kind of like, if people are coming to me and saying, would you like to do this with us, versus me trying to convince a large organization, can we please try to do this? It just seemed a lot easier to, go with people who were already asking you to do something than trying to convince somebody to do something. So that was kind of the moment. And I had enough other work going on that it felt like a safe moment to take that plunge. I probably would have never been able to do it if I didn't have, and I would counsel people to not ever jump out into consulting unless you already have a pretty solid client base.
Along with a client base, did you make a concerted or a considered decision to say, hey, I've got, a nest egg stuffed away, I've got, time, these kinds of things? Or was more like, hey, I've got some ongoing gigs, and those are clearly going to continue on, and those are, no one will ever cancel a contract.
Well, that's another huge risk. I've never had any savings, just because usually when you work at a nonprofit, you don't. I have 2 kids. Their dad is still in El Salvador. So, I'm kind of, getting them through life and through college and stuff. So it wasn't really like I had a nest egg or any money. It was just kind of that sort of leap of faith that I was getting enough people asking me to do different types of work. And I felt confident that, that I would be able to make it work. Or if not, of course you always think, well, I could always go back to translating. I could always try to get a regular job again. So, you always have, I think, in your mind, some different backup plans in case things do fall through. And they do fall through sometimes. People get grants that they think they're able to work with you for a period of time, and maybe their grant gets cut, or there are always kind of those things that are out of your control. But I feel like if you really throw yourself into things and do a really good job at things and don't cut corners and really put everything you have into a piece of work, that then you can feel confident and solid about what you're helping other people to do or what you're producing for them. And hopefully that speaks for itself. in the long term. So we don't do, as Kurante, we don't really go out and market ourselves and try to convince people to hire us. Most of the time it's people that kind of know what we do or have been able, have come across other pieces of work that we've done and thought that they wanted to do something similar, or they wanted to, see that same type of a skill set applied to a problem or a challenge that they were facing as an organization. And that's what I think I also really like about this work is, it's pretty hard to, I think it's for somebody like me, it's really impossible to sell myself. I'm not interested in going out and self-promoting and selling myself and all that. So I just have to kind of also rely on, on doing the best quality work I can and hope that it speaks for itself.
You sort of have led me to one of the questions I like to ask is, it sounds like you depend upon your network to bring you business through referral. You're not out there putting proposals out or those kinds of things. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, that's true. And I think also, we both, Wayne and I, do a lot of blogging and just writing about, things we've learned. I use writing to help me sort through things that I'm confused about. So I think a lot of that blogging and writing has been helpful for, people will come across things that we've done or that we've worked on. And so, we don't, at this point, we haven't really been going for RFPs and, trying to get in on proposals and things like that at all, really.
Nice. So 2.5 years or almost 2.5 years now, you've been Kurante. Either during that experience or maybe in the work that you did previously as a rule breaker, can you think of a time when you were working on a project or you've been working with a client, you were delivering and you expected one result, but got a completely different result, either positive or negative or just surprising?
I can't even think of a specific example because I think that's just how it usually works. I guess you're always trying to, work towards particular deliverables, but I feel like there are always things that change along the way. So I can't really think of a, really surprising, result or anything like that.
Let me flip the question around for you. One of the things I picked up on in your explanation a few minutes ago was you have been able to either put on the table or ask the question with either the team or the group that you're working with about what they should be looking at, not only now, but maybe 2 or 3 years from now. What are some of those things that you're looking at right now that you think are important that either others are not listening to or that, you're sort of banging the drum about?
That's another good question. I think something that always gets in the way of the development industry as an industry, and we harp about it all the time. Everyone talks about it, but it's really, making sure that whatever's being done is being done with community involvement and community participation. So I think one of the things that I'm really struggling with right now when I'm asked to do work or when I'm thinking about work is there's just this huge focus from certain agencies on scale. And that sometimes makes me really nervous because I think, scale is great, but how are we defining scale? What do we mean by scale? Why is scale so important? And I know the business reasons and, it's cheaper and, blah, blah, blah. But I just, I have this big concern about kind of treating development, which is a funny word too, because it means so many different things to so many different people, but seeing it as like big box stores and McDonald's and, just sort of that approach to what development means really, really concerns me because I think that local nuance, local context, we all like it in our own lives. I like to be able to eat a variety of food in my neighborhood, or I like to be able to have a little bit of say over what I do, or, what my healthcare system is, how my healthcare system is treating me. And so one of the big things I think maybe is going to be questioned in the next few years is, and it's being questioned now, but I don't think enough, is that whole question around scale and scaling up and the role of technology in delivering scale. Another word I absolutely hate is delivering development. It's just this really, for me, a really paternal kind of way of looking at what these large grants are doing. So that's one of the things that I think about a lot, and that concerns me. And everyone's trying to find, even though everyone says we know there's no magic bullet, we know there's no silver bullet, we know technology isn't going to solve everything. But can you just give us a proposal that tells us how technology can be a magic bullet to solve everything? So it's this real, I think, disconnect, and the other piece of, we want you to be innovative, but it has to be proven, which that's just not how it works. I mean, if you're being really, truly innovative or trying something that hasn't been tried before, of course you don't know if it's going to work or not. So I think there are these changes that are happening in the industry of people wanting to do things in different ways. But then, as I was mentioning before, you're working inside of these giant organizations, it's really hard for them to adapt and adjust their internal ways of working to be able to be more agile and more responsive. We're talking about feedback loops and the importance of feedback loops. But then, how quickly can a giant organization, or even a mid-sized organization, how quickly can it actually turn if it does get some type of feedback from people participating in a program? How quickly can you actually adapt your management decision-making process, your funding, all of that to the feedback you're getting from people? So I think there are going to be changes going forward in the next few years of hopefully, kind of digging into some of the changes that need to be made institutionally in order to actually be more responsive and more agile.
Where do you think the core of those changes should be? I mean, are you an advocate of more local sort of capacity or using local capacity? Is it breaking up some of the big guys, some of the big organizations, or is there one or two ways in that you'd like to see change happen over the next 5 or 10 years?
I think that decentralizing, is interesting. There are going to be challenges, just having worked within large organizations that restructure all the time. I don't think anyone really has it. No one's ever really figured out what the best way is to structure, either an individual organization that has different, offices and entities around the world, or, even in a program, you have challenges with local organizations, all kinds of challenges that come in. And I don't, have that sort of romantic notion that just because it's local, it means it's 100% good. I mean, humans are humans everywhere. And so I don't, I mean, that's a big question, and I think it's a big challenge. But I think the way we've seen a lot of other industries get just completely disrupted over the last few years, I think we are seeing the development industry starting to get disrupted, whether it's through new players coming on the scene, smaller, more agile, more maybe internet or web-based, NGOs coming along, social entrepreneurs, the business sector getting involved in different aspects of development that's more customer focused rather than, a lot of times NGOs are a little bit more paternalistic about expecting people to just want whatever they're giving them or whatever they're offering. So I think there's just going to be a lot of shifts and changes. You have BRIC countries as well. You have planet and climate change and all that stuff going on. There's just so many different elements. And so I think one of the key things is going to be being able to have really strong leadership and people who aren't afraid to take some of those risks, not irresponsible risks that are going to put people's lives at risk, or especially put the people we're supposedly trying to support, not putting them at risk, but really putting our own institutions and organizations and brands and staff at risk. Maybe I shouldn't be in this space. Maybe I shouldn't be taking up a seat at this particular organization. Maybe it should be somebody else. Maybe it should be a younger person. Maybe it should be someone with a different, background in education. Maybe, we shouldn't be putting a whole bunch of people from the United States through international development. Maybe it should be, hiring young people from universities in countries that have development programs. I mean, there are just so many different ways that I think we could be, I say we, that's all of us really thinking about how to best improve, political, economic, social, cultural well-being of people all over the world. And that doesn't leave out the United States either. We've got huge problems here. And so I feel like, there's so many issues around the world, and obviously the world as at large has not been very good at fixing any of them up to now. So something definitely needs to change.
How do you keep from being overwhelmed? It's, just sort of listening to the topics that you put on the table, and, there's just this universe of not only angles to come at it and perspectives and whatnot, but there's this infinite nature of problems that you could consider applying yourself to. You've sort of chosen your seat at the table through ICT for Development, but do you stay focused there, or how do you contain the overwhelm of this industry?
I mean, it is definitely overwhelming. And I think, having a certain set of values, I mean, there are certain things that I'm just not interested in working on because I don't believe in them. And I'm not going to name them because that's probably
a good idea.
But yeah, I mean, there are just certain aspects or certain approaches to this work that I'm not a fan of, and I don't like to be involved in them. And so that's one way you can't avoid everything that doesn't fit your values and your ethics. But I feel like, up to now, I have been able to kind of keep a certain sense of, belief in the projects and the programs that I'm involved in. And so I think that's one way. And I think also I'm just kind of a naturally curious person. So one of the things I love about this work is being able to go into those kind of uncharted territories or new things, maybe not uncharted for everyone, but uncharted for a particular small group, or, a way of doing or looking at something, or getting a different set of people in the room to look at this, a challenge that people have been looking at for the last, 200 years. So I think that's what keeps me interested and engaged, is being surrounded by really curious, ethical, questioning, analytical, really smart people that you get to come across in this sector. I know they're all in every sector, but I think that's what I really love about the development sector, are all the people that I get to engage with on a regular basis, in different parts of the world, at different sectors or different stratas of society, and just getting to sort of enrich my own understanding of the world through the eyes of other people, and through the ways of thinking, and constantly just being challenged at how I'm approaching something or seeing something because someone else is coming at it from a completely different angle. And so I think that's what keeps me sane and keeps me interested in this field. But, I won't lie. I think about it all the time. I think about, should I really be here? Should I really be doing this work? Is it making a difference? Aside from me getting to do research on really cool things that, help me, you don't always know if what you're doing is actually contributing to helping someone else, or helping the people that you think you're supposed to be helping. So, it's a back and forth, but it's something I constantly struggle with.
So many things there. How have you been able to, through this process, to navigate family life and professional life? One of the things that we find often is a struggle, especially in the development and aid world, is a need for travel, a need to be away from family, a need to be on assignment, quote unquote. What's been your answer to that?
That was really tough. So I moved to the States with, it was great when I was in El Salvador because we lived next door to my parents-in-law. I didn't travel a whole lot. I did work really long hours, which I'm sure contributed to, my marriage not working out, because I definitely was, at times much more interested in work than I was in being a wife. And so I think that for a lot of women, that becomes a challenge when you want to have the same career opportunities and the same freedom to be out in the world, doing your thing. If you have a partner who isn't necessarily on that same track and wants your life to be, both of you, more of a family-oriented life, I think that can be very challenging for women, especially because I don't think women are normally in that lead role of deciding, this is my career takes precedent over my marriage, or over, you're going to just have to not, make your own dinner, or, whatever it ends up being. I think traditionally it's been women who've had to sort of follow, and men who've had the freedom to develop their careers. So I think that is a big challenge for a lot of women who work in this field, or really in any kind of profession that is as demanding as aid work.
Just as a reflection as well, I have children as well, and that's one of our conscious decisions as a partnership on this end, is who gets to travel, when are you traveling, how much do you travel, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's huge to work out, and I think something I didn't foresee myself going into this career, and obviously didn't as I just kind of jump into things left and right. I just, it didn't necessarily, I was married for about 11 years, which I don't think was a failure in any way, shape, or form. I don't really like to have regrets about anything. And it was a really great 10 or 11 years. And I loved living in El Salvador for that period of time. But I think a big thing that did contribute to just our, growing apart from each other was that career piece of it. When I was in El Salvador, my mother-in-law was next door, and she was always home. And so I didn't have that, childcare problem that I think a lot of women have with the expense of childcare, with finding people that you trusted or people that you would, be okay leaving your children with. Those are also huge decisions if you travel a lot. So that was much easier when I was in El Salvador, because then when I moved to the United States, I moved to a place where I did not have any sort of family ties. And so that was kind of a huge challenge of, being on your own with a couple of kids and, ages, 9 and 4, and really trying to figure out how to balance all that stuff. So, yeah, it's tough, but, they've both come out the other side. I have an 18-year-old and a 20, almost 23-year-old, and they both, I think, have, one, a very healthy respect for pursuing their own dreams and passions. They're both very internationally interested and inclined. So I think they've also had the opportunity sometimes to travel with me on, different assignments or whatever. So, I think you all, it works out either way. I could have, stayed home, stayed married and been somewhat miserable and, raised kids that saw a miserable parent, or, I could kind of pursue some of my dreams, keep a good relationship with everyone involved. And, I think we're all the better for having made that choice of separating and, having me come up here. I mean, I think the kids also recognize the sacrifice that their dad made in letting them go, but they also recognize the opportunities that they've had by living in the States, that they never would have had if they had stayed in El Salvador. So again, like life just takes you places and you just kind of adapt to it and make the best of it. And I think they're pretty happy with how their lives are at this point as well. So yeah.
Thanks for putting that on the table. That was intimate. I really appreciate that. And it's something that I think is an ongoing conversation in our sector that I think we need to have a little more open and honest, and transparent conversation about more often. But you've led me to another great place in that. Where do you see yourself in 5 years with Kurante and how that work is continuing to develop? Do you see it sort of maintaining its small, agile, 2-person sort of boutique firm, or is there a vision saying, hey, let's build this out and create some structure around some products or services that we think are important? Or what's that vision, and where do you think you're going?
I mean, that's a good question. We haven't really talked about it or thought about it a whole lot up to now, I think, because I said we are definitely not seeing ourselves as the next, Chemonics or anything like that. So, I think for me, as long as I'm able to do interesting, motivating work through Kurante, I don't really care if it grows or not. Again, this is like my issue with scale, right? So,
absolutely.
So being able to do work that I enjoy, I don't want to be in a position where I'm managing other people who get to do really cool, fun work, and I'm like doing budgets and making sure audits are working out and, pushing paperwork around and writing agreements. And I just find that kind of stuff really boring. There are people who love it, people who are really fascinated by, by growth and acquisition and stuff like that. It's just not in my blood. I just have a hard time getting excited about it. So I just want to do interesting work. And I think I have enough channels to keep doing it. I think we do want to, at some point, maybe formalize a little bit more of the kind of exactly what we do. I may not always want to be so closely affiliated with the ICT piece of it. I don't know, because there's so many other aspects of just human development, human interaction, and social and political, and all that stuff that I find fascinating. And there may be other things that I want to do. I'm interested in, looking more domestically, but I don't know if I have the skill sets. I'd love to write something, but I know that it's kind of impossible for anyone to write a book these days, because everybody's dream is to write a book and everyone has to self-publish, and it's all kind of, that industry is kind of, been disrupted as well. So yeah, there are tons of things I think that are out there that I'll figure out. I have one more kid to get through university, and then I can be less.
And you're free.
Less responsible financially for anyone. So then, I would say I can live in a hut and eat, tortillas and beans. I really don't care. But you probably shouldn't raise a family in a hut on tortillas and beans unless you don't have other options, I guess. Yeah.
So the last question I have for you is one that I ask every guest here on the podcast, and it's really, again, just a reminder, our listeners are people who are maybe coming out of that master's degree looking, sort of bright-eyed at that first position at an organization, or people who are transitioning to this sector from either a different industry altogether.
Yep.
What's your one or two pieces of critical advice for them about how to create sustainability and satisfaction in a career in development?
I think a few things. I mean, I think for one thing that always really drives me crazy when somebody new comes in is I just feel like people need to listen a lot and be humble and inquisitive, and just be really prepared for your assumptions to be challenged. Don't think that, oh my gosh, these people are so stupid. Why didn't they know that they could just do this? If people are not taking a really obvious, straightforward solution, there's probably a reason that they haven't done it. So I think just being open and really understanding, whether it's an organization or a community or a sector, or, whatever it is, just really take a lot of time to listen and to be really humble. And I think that kind of leads into maybe a next piece of advice, which is I just feel like we need more people in the sector who are humble and who are supporting, rather than having to be in the limelight all the time. So I think that's really critical for anybody working in a social sector or in a field like this. And then I guess the last piece of advice is to, throw yourself into everything, but not so much that you get completely sucked dry, because I think typically development organizations are not the best at human resources, unfortunately. So I think a lot of people get really burned out really easily. And, what I've had people tell me is that, they'll just, development agencies will see you like a sponge. They'll kind of, squeeze all the water out of you, and there's always someone waiting to take your place. And that's a pretty depressing, way of looking at it. But I have a lot of colleagues who are really burnt out. They're really cynical. They're really tired. And so I think really taking care of yourself and making sure that, when you wake up and you go to do that thing that you're doing in the morning, is it still stimulating you? Is it still, do you still feel passionate about it? Do you still feel like it's worthwhile? And if you don't, then really seriously think about making some kind of a change. And it's going to be up to you to navigate that change, because no one's going to see, oh, wow, you're really tired, let me help you, because everyone is always really tired. So, yeah.
Linda, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you. It was very cathartic. Hopefully I didn't depress anyone.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.